Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whisky podcast. I'm joined today, and as always, actually, I take that back. I'm usually joined by Jason, Neal, Patrick, Harris, Johnston, Yellen. But today, in an unusual series of events, but a much welcome series of events, I am honored to be with the one and only Jessica Rabbit Lomas.
Oh, thanks so much for revealing to the listeners my secret middle name. Now they all know. They can
I assume that's your middle name.
Yeah,
Is
obviously.
it Jessica Rabbit Lomas?
Yeah. What else would it be?
I can't think of anything else.
Sounds good to me then.
So Jason is currently out in the wilderness. Our listeners may remember from last year when he went out with his whiskey group from the Palouse up in Idaho, Washington, and they went to the Frank Church Bitterroot and spent about a week and a half without any electronics, no Apple Watch, no iPhone, no computer, no nothing, clearing trails, not with chainsaws, not with anything mechanized, but with axes and saws. Like, I feel as if when Jason was asked to the meeting to potentially join this group, and they asked, who will join us? I pictured Jason chiming in saying, "You've got my axe." It was like a fellowship of the clearing of the trails, if you will.
Is that when he still had his big mega beard? It is entirely possible that's precisely how that went down.
I think he did have his mega beard. So it had to have been it.
I would have thought it would have been the complete lack of any modern technology, definitely no phones, no social medias, none of that. He'd have been like, this sounds like my kind of way to spend some time. Sign me up.
Does it upset you as much as it upsets me that he just is nowhere to be found when it comes to the social media world?
I enjoy that people in our Facebook group persistently attempt to tag him in things and bait him out of his 1900s home where they don't have internet. I think it's fun. I think it's exciting that it makes me still feel like a young person being like, hey, did you see this? And then I stop myself and I'm like, no, of course you didn't see this thing on the internet. On the old Twitters or this thing on the Instas. And he just looks at me and he says, why are you asking me continually?
Yeah.
Like, well,
Yeah.
Maybe this week was a week you're like, hey, I really need to get involved in this hashtag Instagram.
Because he didn't delete any of his accounts. Like, they all exist.
There. Does that upset you more that they're still there? They're not gone. They're there, but he just chooses not to look at them.
Right? It's kind of like going somewhere and you're at a museum and that painting's behind the thing. You're like, oh, but it's just there. I could just touch it, right? It's just like he's just there and you can tag him, but he's not there. You can't actually connect with him.
I think that brings him great delight. I think he's probably thrilled. And he'll be laughing.
Totally thrilled.
I can't do a convincing Jason laugh, but he'll be laughing that we're even having this conversation like, oh, you guys.
So listen, Jason aside, look, he failed us this week, and I'm perfectly fine with that because I've got you. But you've recently come back from a trip yourself. Now, granted, you were on the Instagrams, you were on the Facebooks, but you were out in your what I assume to be your favorite country in the world, Sweden. Am I correct in saying that?
They definitely potentially have the bid. But I'm willing to be invited to other places to assess whether or not I need to make that my favourite country. It's not a fixed status. And I don't know if he's listening to this podcast. I'll make him listen. But yeah, I was at our friend Anders' summer house, which is on the west coast of Sweden. It's a bit of connected islands that's called Orust. And it was delightful. It was super sunny, there was lots of whiskey, lots of nice friends, lots of swimming in the sea. Like all the things that don't exist in Scotland Well, they do, but with like a little tiny asterisk that come with like, you will get hypothermia if you do these things. But yeah, it's been the end of a series of long trips. I've kind of come back to my flat and I'm like, oh, yeah, this is my house. Ugh. Because we were in Campbelltown and then we went to Isla, obviously, for the facial.
Oh, for the facial.
And then we were home for kind of a weekish and then we set off again to Sweden. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind. It's nice. Now I'm like...
Do you like coming back to your bed? Is that
I love
a
my
thing?
bed.
Because you travel quite a bit, yeah.
I love my bed, but I'm really bad at... the worst bit for me of any trip is when you come home and you have to put stuff away and you're like flinging stuff in cupboards, just like, I just don't want to look at this anymore. Get rid of it. Which I'll leave my suitcases lying around for maximum amount of time because I just can't bring myself to put them away. And then I'll just sort of shove them in a cupboard, pretend it's... And then it always bites me in the ass because when I come to pack again, I'm like, where's my blah, blah? And if I was sensible, I can hear my mum being like, just put it away. Just put it away.
Yep.
Sorry, Mum, I'm a grown-up and I still doing the washing and like putting away the things you've bought. It's the absolute... Every time I come home from Isla, I despair. I wish there was like a button. Why do we not have the technology for that? Click a button, everything is in its rightful place.
Almost like a Star Trek transporter, but for the belongings within your suitcase. Yeah.
Like an unpack button that it all just... The washing is done and folded. All the toiletries are back in the cupboards. You know, like that kind of stuff. It's difficult. This is also the world's worst first world problem. Like, it's really difficult doing the washing. I'm sorry. I'm very grateful for having the ability to travel and visit my friends all over the place. I don't begrudge it at all.
Yeah, I think the kids would say, check your privilege.
Yeah, the kids are probably right, to be fair. You know, like... Because unlike Jason, I've just spent 2 days complaining on Instagram about my suitcases not coming home with me. Which, again, is a terrible first world problem to be like, I went on a trip abroad in my suitcase. Yeah. And like, I think I've used up... If each person has an allocation of social medias, I've used Jason's allocation just to whine like a whiny little girl. But don't worry, if anybody is looking at my Instagrams, service is back to normal. It's my usual irreverent nonsense with interspace with pictures of whiskey. Good. No more suitcase chat. It's good. Although I was, doing some heavy repping for Apple yesterday, making people buy AirTags. Other trackable things are available.
So listen, I know that we need to talk about whiskey and mezcal and rum and all the things that Thad Vogler is quite interested in and talks about. But you mentioned this before we started recording, and you said, well, with my suitcases lost, I had AirTags, so I knew where they were. And being an old, I didn't know what an AirTag was.
But you have all the Apple devices, so it's really kind of inexcusable.
Like every Apple device, but I didn't know
not an
Apple.
AirTag, man.
What's an AirTag?
So they're like these little discs, and I only really use them in my luggage. But I guess if you lose your keys, you could put them on your keys, or it's like a device finder. So for the Apple users listening, on the little app that's the Find My, that's how you find your things. And it doesn't quite track in live time, and it depends on somebody with an Apple device walking past it, which you can imagine in an airport there's tons of people doing that, so that's how you can see where it is. But it was so helpful because without being able to point at my phone and be like, it's here, it would have just been a sort of shrug of like, maybe your suitcase is here, maybe it's not. Because unsurprisingly, they're not that keen to let you just start rummaging through your baggage hole of any suitcase that takes your fancy.
But is there any part of you that feels that's a bit big brothery? Like you can't be the only one who knows the global positioning of one's bag, one's thing, one's whatever.
Look, if someone else wants to take my suitcase full of washing that needs doing, you are kind of weirdly welcome to it. I mean, I'd like some money for that because I think that's the kind of thing you could charge for. But it is, but it's not. I guess post-COVID, aviation's a bit wonky, and it adds a sort of reassurance Although not, I mean, it gives you real fear because it doesn't necessarily, like I say, it doesn't necessarily update in real time. So when you're looking at it, if nobody's walked past your bags for a while, so it doesn't like ping. That gives you a slight moment. But I wouldn't travel without them now. So that's my pro traveling tip, which I feel like does relate to today's topic because there's a lot of travel involved.
Ooh, in a way you stole my segue, but that's okay. It's a slightly different segue.
Take it back.
No, right? Like, one of the things that I found interesting about this book, and I'll be honest, I have not completed this book. So, dear listener, please know that I am so shit at reading books because I don't have the time. By the time I can read the book, I'm in, the day is done and I've opened it up and I'm in bed and books give me sleepy eyes. So I think there may be an audiobook version of this and so I may have to do that to do the completion. But one of the things that what's that?
Sorry, I was just being Jason there. Completion. Carry on.
Oh, calling HR. I need an audiobook to bring me to completion. Anyway, is this thing on? Anyway, one of the things that I found intriguing about it when Jason first told me about the book, because it was him that brought it to my attention, was this idea that it was this memoir / travel log type book, and it reminded me of Hans Offringa and his Road to Gregeliki book, which was the same. And I really like that. There's something about reading someone else's own personal journey. You kind of feel like you're a fly on the wall and you get to experience it through their eyes and through their taste buds. And so that idea, I really like. I like being a fly on the wall. And that's the sense that I'm getting so far where I am in the book.
I think you're excused. We could make Jason do an audio version. I think that'd be fun.
But you'd have to listen to Jason's voice for... Are you okay with that?
Yeah, he's got a very soothing kind of tone.
He does, yeah. It's very warm.
Although you saying that has sort of given me the chills. Because if he's just above your bed whispering to you, "Hey Joshua, chapter 2."
Oh, but yeah, he could read it like in sort of like an ASMR version of it, where he's just sort of whispering it and he's got the mouth noises to go along with it.
I find those deeply unsettling, all of those videos. I'm just like, either talk to me properly or don't. The one where they're like, folding the crisp linen.
Oh my gosh, no.
No, I don't think I have the right accent for ASMR anyway, but yeah. Okay, right. A normal audiobook would be good, Jason, if you're listening.
Yeah, there you go. So yeah, so anyway, that was the kind of the idea about it. Excited me, just having this sort of memoir, this travel log kind of thing. So I know you're much further along in the book than I am. What is your take? What are you digging about it so far?
What you've just mentioned, I really like the idea of it being a journey with not just one person, but it's the way he plays off and explains the other guys that he's on the road with. You feel like you're kind of part of a bit of a, like a motley crew of guys. But the book I have two problems with. One, it makes me incredibly thirsty and makes me want to be somewhere in France drinking all these like Armagnacs and cognacs and all these amazing wines. And the other thing is it makes me really hungry, which is odd. Because the cuisine of France, I would not say is necessarily my, I guess something I would naturally reach for. It's quite the things that they're talking about when they talk about eating all these foie gras and like all these roulettes, like very gout-inducing, heavy, rich foods. But there is just something about the way they talk about them. It makes me quite hungry. So that's my two main complaints about the book. Other than that, I'm loving what I'm reading so far. And I actually did text Jason being like, maybe we should do like a road trip around France. We should find an excuse to be... I haven't been to France since I was like 10 years old. And I went to Disneyland. So I don't think that really counts. We went to Disneyland in Paris. So definitely haven't really seen France. But I'd love to kind of go around these vineyards and these spirits producers and just... It's a bit kind of... I don't know, Keith Floyd, romantic road tripping. What we need to do is find some way of commissioning that. Make people pay for us to go around these places.
You know, that has me thinking of The Trip.
Yeah.
With, right? It's funny, Haida and I were absolutely addicted to the movies. We never got the TV show here, but you can get it. But we now have these grand plans of basically following Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan's restaurant trip for each movie. Just go to that country, go to each restaurant. You can go online and find all of the restaurants they've gone to.
I'm surprised someone hasn't set that up as like a tour.
Yeah,
you would think that'd be really popular because the TV show's great. And I think what makes that kind of concept so appealing is, one, they're going to really nice places and having just like a great time eating and drinking. But I wonder how much of it you would feel was missing without those two, because I feel like the way they interact, that kind of the way they play off each other, which is sort of staged, sort of not. I wonder if you would feel like you're missing it. But maybe that would mean you and Haida would have to fill in the gaps. Which one of you would be Steve Coogan or Rob Brydon?
I would be okay with that.
How good is your Welsh accent?
So I've tried doing a Welsh accent, and I end up just sounding Jamaican.
Oh, okay.
So, like, here's a very good example. So, you know, you think of Wales and Welsh, and you think of Penderyn Distillery. So we say Penderyn, but a Welsh person says Penderyn. Right, there's like a sing-songiness to it, and Penderyn man, right? I mean, like, it's just you could just go down and go from Welsh to Jamaican, and you know, and just offend both peoples at the same time.
Yeah, I've got my paging HR button here ready to press when I feel like we've crossed too many lines and interrupted too many people. Well, I guess the way they say that's a bit like the way people on Islay say the distillery names. They make them sound so much better. Like, they don't just say Lagavulin. They don't make it like really straight. It's got that kind of lilt in it, so it becomes Lagavulin. And they don't say Bowmore. It's like Bowmore. They've got like a funny lean in the pronunciation of the descriptions. Yeah, of the distilleries. Okay, well, this is good. I feel like you two could set off doing the trip. I've long had this conversation with Mariella of Arran Distilleries fame, that she and I want to do like a kind of have you ever seen a cookery show called The Two Fat Ladies?
Oh yeah,
it's like
they
90s.
cook with so much butter. Yeah.
They were amazing. Clarissa Dixon Wright and Jennifer, I can't think of what her surname was, but yeah, those two. I said that Mariella and I could do like a modern Two Fat Ladies around Italy, and she could be driving me on a Vespa, and I'll just be screaming at the back as we like eat our way around Italy.
Oh my gosh. And there's got to be panettone in every episode.
There would just be, it would be a heavy carbs based TV show, if I'm honest with you. But I could live with that. I think that'd be quite good fun. We could have we could go and visit her family. She's from outside Naples, so obviously we would have to check out, see whether or not those pizzas match up with these Connecticut pizzas I keep getting told about. Sorry, Mary, sorry. And yeah, we could just have a jolly old knees up. I feel like it would be a really good TV show. I just need somebody to pay me lots of money for that.
You'd have a regular viewer in me. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Subscription level 1. That's thanks for your support. I'm delighted. But yeah, and then we could do a memoir. I've always had this like slightly romantic streak of kind of like travel writing about food and that kind of thing. So yeah, this book totally is up my street. But I need to, obviously, France has been covered. Thad's done a good job. I need to find another. Yeah. Maybe I'll be the first travel writer of Sweden. I'll write it really quick before you and Jason come and invade the country.
So listen, before we go on, because I know we will go on, I wanted to hand this over to Jason and to Thad Vogler to hear about their conversation. Jason traveled all the way over to the left coast, as we like to say, to meet with Thad, and yeah, let's hand it over to them, hear what they have to say. I've got a few things I want to say afterwards, and I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds good. Do it.
Thad, thanks for having me in San Francisco.
You're welcome. You're welcome in the city anytime.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me at Bar Agricole.
A pleasure.
This is a beautiful little spot you've got here.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about your bars, the history there, the making the way in the world, before we get into the book. If that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
So you came up in the bar scene. Did you come up in the scene in San Francisco, or did you find yourself moving over here and making your way in the world?
Worked in restaurants in college and then moved here directly after, and it was a shit economy. It was 92 and just picked up where I left off in school and have been working in bars since. That's when I started bartending, was 93.
Okay.
I mean, in earnest. I became a full-time bartender. I worked at a theater at university where I would do some, impromptu bartending. So when I want to do that bullshit, well, I've been bartending for 35 years. I can tack on 3 years at the beginning because I made a couple gin and tonics.
So what was this city like in 93? And I say that, I think I was here, the first time I was here was 92.
I moved here in 92, and it was, you'll need another hour if we're going to talk about the evolution or devolution of San Francisco. It is so on everyone's mind, especially mine. But in 92, it was AIDS. AIDS was kind of the prevailing story, not to diminish it, but it was, and in bars and restaurants, you were working with men who had AIDS and people were dying, and then there was a kind of, I don't mean to act like my but then there was a kind of, in contrast to that, there was how old are you?
48.
48. So, ecstasy, the late 80s,
sure.
early 90s,
Absolutely.
and there was a kind of contradiction to that malaise, and so there were like mixed nightclubs, and there was a feeling of optimism in the city that,
like a returning energy.
Yeah, and a kind of like just fuck it, we're not gonna surrender kind of thing. When you're 21, 22, who knows what's really happening because you're so subjective. But what I keyed into was mixed nightclubs where there was a feeling of freedom, and I had, right out of school, I traveled a lot and spent a lot of time in England and the sort of dance culture and the music culture anyway, so that there was a feeling, and it was not the the tech city that it is now, and it was on a downturn, and it felt like a much smaller town, and anyway, I'll stop there. Yeah,
I know you're being careful here, and I know you don't want to spend the hour on it. However, I would like to explore a little more. In talking to Bill Thomas at Jack Rose, we've spoken with Bill a couple of times, he's talked about the evolution of DC and how that's gone from, a part of the South, like it was the north end of the South, and then it became very focused, and then gentrification and movements of poverty around the city, and now on post-pandemic, all your through traffic has gone. There's no office workers going past your door for a happy hour, so he was talking pretty carefully about that evolution and how he adapts to that. Don't go on for an hour, but I would be really fascinated
how it relates to the trade
for you.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. For you here, what are you seeing most recently, and where are the difficulties, and And what's even post-pandemic been like?
No, of course. I mean, we stopped operating our places in February of 20, and I started operating again August of 22. So just under a year ago. So I mean, we were in terrible shape at the point COVID came. We had spread thin. We had just opened our fourth place. We had no money in the bank, and we just could not withstand. We couldn't withstand it, and we didn't know about PPE, so we just immediately powered down. And I mean, frankly, there was some relief because it was just like every 4 payrolls and. I'm so dumb in how I do business. I achieved each concept was entirely different. No economy of scale. 4 huge inventories that had no relationship. So at any rate, sorry.
No,
so
that's good.
there was quite a gap. And then to reopen in August, and it was sort of like I don't sail. So pardon the metaphor, opening your sail and oh fuck, where's the wind? You know what I mean? There's just a feeling of I don't know. And even in 2019, you'd get doors open and it'd be everyone's. So it's just a really palpable, immediate feeling of, it's just less. It's just diminished.
Yeah.
And where we are, a lot of year-end stuff comes out March, April. So we're just seeing we are at 32% capacity downtown of what we were in 2019.
Oh, wow.
Of the 63 largest cities in the country, that's 63. I mean, we're talking worse than Detroit, St. Louis. I mean, and it's getting worse as we had thought, recovery will happen, but as commercial leases end, more people are leaving. Yeah. No one's coming back, which it's not unique to us. So at any rate, I've always been kind of a naive operator in that if you feel passionately about what you do and it's beautiful, it'll work. I don't know that that's true. I would say it's probably not true, but it is still how I operate. So we've always been a kind of destination place where we've had a real kind of specific audience. Having 4 places in one town of less than 1 million, you end up competing against each other is dumb. So it's nice to have one spot. There are people who are interested, and they come, but it's 32% of what it was, and that's palpable. So
that's incredible.
Yeah,
man.
it's palpable.
So what does the future look like? Where do you go? Will something fill the gap? Will those commercial spaces turn to residential? Will you get foot traffic again? Do you have to think about? Do you have to move where the people are? I hope you don't mind me asking you what I think are quite personal questions. The thing I love.
These aren't personal questions.
Okay.
Come on.
Well,
Come on.
It's the nitty gritty of a man's business, right? That's.
I'm all for transparency.
And you were so honest in the book that I thought
nice of you to say.
I could be honest with you today.
Sure. I mean, twice a week I'm up at 3 a.m. asking these very same questions. There are, I don't know. I mean, I approach work as many of us do fairly spiritually. I mean, I think that there's a kind of omniscience in the market. You know what I mean? You always have just not quite enough money. And it's why do 58 people a night come when you need 62 people a night? It's just fucking crazy. There's just how could you not believe in a God on some level when it's just who is fucking writing this? So on some level, I'm so broke and I'm so blown out that I on some level I don't care. But that said, we are now the only legal shipper via UPS of spirits in California. Okay. And that took about 18 months. Everyone's shipping spirits illegally, by the way, as you probably know. Everyone. And
I've heard rumor.
Yeah, I mean, that just everyone's saying, "Oh no, it's wine," and we're shipping FedEx, and indeed we tried that, and It's not on. So like, okay, we are going to be, we're going to be a merchant bottler. We're a retailer, not a wholesaler. So it's a little complicated. So it's all collaborative. So I need a producer and I need a wholesaler. And then I put my label on it. But it's like, it's like a Cat and Heads or anything like that. Yeah. So a merchant bottler. So we're building a label, and everyone is trying to get their own label going right now, it turns out. That's the other thing, as you do this for a while and you realize any idea you have, everyone has. Like I remember the first place I opened, it's like tons of reclaimed wood. It's beautiful. It's like, Jesus, reclaimed wood. Such a cliche the second we were open. But at any rate, so merchant bottler, and trying to grab the corner of, it's just about the base material. We're sort of getting into the more kind of booze geek stuff. But which
we will circle back to.
I mean, we have a small, this is an event space. We do a lot of events. Couple times, like Todd Leopold was in last week. Oh, nice. Lance Winters, people like that we have long relationships with. Yeah. We do a big brandy party. We do a big agave party. We're doing a Scotch party.
Sweet.
We'll open like 9 single casks. We'll have a dinner. People are real hungry for that. They're hungry. I think they're much more interested in coming to an event where there's like-minded people. So we'll these sell out handily. So we have this event space, and then we have a sort of 30-seat small reservation space, and we're kind of set up to. It kind of pencils if we're able to sell out that space and do an event or two a week. So
when you started opening up these businesses, and you clearly had a vision, how much of that vision remains? And have you revisited that at times?
Oh, I would say that this has been beneficial in that it's distilled back to its original, pardon the pun, essence. Like this. Capitalism is weird because, and I know that you've encountered this, that if you have a little success, it demands more of you. That there's this idea, it's growth or failure. Those are the two options.
Absolutely.
There's no stasis.
Isn't that something?
It's fucking crazy.
Right.
And I go to other countries, Japan, especially like, people will just operate with 20 seats for 40 years and retire and be done. You know what I mean? But that's because the culture sustains it. And it's a weird kind of self-imposed socialism there. But San Francisco there are fewer, more capitalist places on earth. So, I mean, we had an idea where we just wanted to do, there's so much shit booze. We just wanted to sell booze that wasn't shit. It was that kind of first cocktail renaissance where, everyone's working with MGD whiskeys, and there's this idea that's artisanal, because it has like a Civil War era graphic, but it's made basically in an offshore refinery onshore in Indiana. You know what I mean? Like, like there's just like what people are really drinking. Like it has no relationship. So to the base material, to the land. Bar Agricole, right? Agricole rum was very transformative for me. Like, oh, fuck. Like, if you taste something made from sugarcane, which is a grass, you get a breadth of flavor that you don't get from of course, good Jamaican rums with a certain kind of fermentation. Like, wow. But, like a column distilled white rum from Puerto Rico, versus a small pot or a coffee still made from fresh pressed sugar cane with wild fermentation. It's just like that's a big deal. So I just wanted to go in that direction and wanted to turn people on to that. So that, if anything, it's kind of backslid. Like there is a huge curiosity. Is this too much of a digression?
No, not in the slightest. No, please keep going.
I'm sure you wouldn't tell me if it was. No. There was 15 years ago, there was this huge, call it a cocktail renaissance, and it was very much about production of drinks and mustaches and braces and, you know what I mean? But drink making, right? But still bitter flavors come back into, there are 4 sweet, sour, bitter, salt, right? That's it. So it's like we were kind of unilaterally just doing sweet and sour. I mean, when I started bartending, I just, I made Cosmopolitans and Lemon Drops for 10 years, but I still liked it. And that was cool because then it's just like, that's when I just like dilution, like this ice is terrible. And this, how can you possibly get this? So it's not, how do you get some concentration of flavor? And at any rate, but getting back to the question at hand, drinks making, right? And then it was, so there's curiosity, but what you're making the drink with quickly got the brands are so adaptive and so smart that like, hey, let's do Negroni week. So then the one bitter flavor becomes Campari, and Campari is like, it's just industrial sweeteners and food coloring and extracts. And so there was a kind of like, again, a feeling of optimism like 15 years ago, and then it quickly all got branded out and everything. And I think we got the new normal is drinks are better. But there's like maybe people were moving from bourbon to rye, like, oh, wow, this is made from a grain. And rye is different than bourbon because there's whatever spice, whatever. Then maybe people move from rye to mezcal, right? Like, oh, wow. So there's a kind of awakening to what is this made from and what's in the glass's relationship to what's made from. That's why Scotch is so fucking amazing, because Scotch in its highest form is untouchable, because you have, like I finally tasted the Springbank local barley, and it's just like, just like, damn, like, just so good.
At the time that it's going on the secondary for 300 and 400 pounds a bottle, and totally, oh my God, blowing out the water what you would ever want from Springbank local barley. Yeah.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's some. Well,
so there you go. Yeah. Isn't that moving? I find that moving. Like we have a cask of Kilchoman on the wall, and it's the 100% Islay, and I'm a big. So at any rate, like provenance of barley, like that's something. And I don't care. I mean, I truly believe that's something. Of course, water, manipulation of the barley with malting, if there's a real regional peat, you know what I mean? The fermentation, if there's wild fermentation, if there is a yeast living there naturally that is also a part of the area, you know what I mean? Like, absolutely. So it's just all of these things that coalesce to create a final flavor with Scotch. Sadly, as you know, it's like, well, actually almost all of the Scotch is made from, barley from, if you're lucky, Northern England, but Eastern Europe, it's all malted centrally. It's, you know what I mean? So it's just, it's like a kind of Mr. Potato Head, like, we'll put a 9 this and a 7 this and a 4 that and a 7 that, and here you go. And like, and then fucking collectors will all, at any rate, you know what I mean? It's just like, but it's good for us. It's good for us. Because that interest in like, well, it's sort of, but it feels kind of like IPAs, like, really, another IPA, another IPA. What other IPAs do you have? Like,
it's unbelievable.
They're all the fucking same.
Unbelievable.
Man. I mean, it's the same grain, it's the same malting facility, it's the same casks, second fill bourbon. It's the same. You know what I mean? It's like, so. At any rate, like, there is still so much. All of this was to say there was this explosion of curiosity, largely about recipes, bitter flavors. There was like, ooh, now people are into agave, where you taste, this amazing base ingredient. But still, it's kind of regressing back to the big brands. Like, people still just kind of can't move beyond the big four bourbons. You know what I mean? In their infinite variety, you know what I mean?
I want to use that to come back to a wonderful point you made that I've been thinking about myself, and it was raised most recently to me by Ollie Chilton, who's with Elixir Brands, and they just took over Tormore, and he was making this observation about growth, and if you're not growing, you're failing. You can't be stationary. And in listening to you and the products that you want to present to people, it doesn't sound scalable, right? Right?
I'm trying to raise money, so let's. Yeah.
Right, but to your point about that Japanese restaurant that's had 20 seats for 40 years, how do you grapple with that? Look, I can put these products in front of 58 to 62 people a night, run events that are exciting and interesting to people, and someone says, brilliant. Now do that a second time and a third time and a fourth time, and now take it to New York and now take it to Tokyo. Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah.
This is a small, bespoke product that lives in that realm, and you don't fall back into that trap of here come the big brands who turned this into industrial production 20, 30, 40 years ago and are killing it. Where do you find your spot in all of that?
No, it's a that's the question, right? I mean, a diversity of product, right? So it's I mean, merchant bottling is old, you know.
Yeah.
So obviously, you know. So I'm a huge fan of Cadden Heads, and I love the reality that Hennessy and Johnny Walker and all of these brands are merchant bottlers, right? So even the brand always comes first. The brand always, and we know the brand is basically like an app. It's this parasitic thing that can attach to any production. So and I remember what do you like? Wait, I remember in the early '90s, like when Patron being sold again, Stolichnaya, I remember in college there was Russian exchange students. They brought Stolichnaya corn and like rye vodkas and these 375s. And I was like, whoa, these are incredible. And then Pepsi ends up buying Stolichnaya and is becoming aware of the brand endures, but it's not the same thing in the bottle. So what's in the bottle is, which is to say there is a long history of people building brands who are not producers. In fact, that's always what's going to succeed. Do you know what I mean?
Interesting.
So Grey Goose, Casamigos. Not to say that those are my aspirations. But whatever. I mean, every American bourbon that was launched in the not every, but thousands of bourbon labels where they are not making the fucking whiskey they're selling you. It's so, which is to say there is a schism that the label is not necessarily the label has nothing to do with the producer. So that is as old as spirit. So all of that is to say there's no problem having a label and accumulating more product under the auspices of a label. So that's a very kind of mercenary way of describing it. But and then simultaneously, like if you look at what's happened in coffee, I mean, this is a very parallel move. Like coffee in the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, trade routes. Coffee is everywhere. There are these industrial blends of coffee that everyone drinks, right? And then there's an explosion in the 80s of what if we make all of these frappuccino on the level of recipe, right? So that's the second wave. There's Starbucks, Peet's, Costa or whatever, all of these, So what you said, I'll have an oat vanilla latte, right? That wasn't a consideration 30 years ago. So this proliferation of recipe and then the third wave of coffee is single origin, right? So this is all well and good, but what's the base ingredient in this latte or this whatever? So people become more and more interested in the origin of the coffee. So Blue Bottle, James is a friend of mine and actually is on my board. They end up saying, well, they collect however many tiny artisanal producers, and there's a relation there. So there's a front, white label, right? So there's a Blue Bottle label, and then there's a celebration of the origin of the producer on the back label.
Nice.
So it's not a direct translation, and so Cadenheads does this, right? So, or whatever, any number of whiskey cask bottlers. So we're not limited to whiskey. So I've got that cask of Armagnac, a cask of that's an old habit. So getting growth along those lines of many small producers with our front label and their back label. So again, it's not a unique concept, but hopefully, if you have certain standards, people will appreciate them and the label will grow. That's the hard part.
Well, and just listening to you now, thinking we already live in a 3-tier system in America,
right?
And that attachment of label to tell the story is the 4th tier. Right? Right. And I think the dodge right now is, where can you lose a tier? And so one of our recent episodes, we covered DTC, right? Direct to consumer.
Right.
And who's fighting that tooth and nail? The distributors,
absolutely.
The wholesalers.
Absolutely.
Right? And as you go down that path of examining, well, what is your role here? Right? What are you doing to get those bottles into those retailers or into those bars? Right? Well, you're walking in, you're going, you need your Johnny.
Right.
You need your, insert large brand here. I don't want to make a list of large brands.
Yeah.
I don't need to make enemies. But it's check.
Yeah.
Oh, and then we've got this little project over here.
Right.
Boom.
Right.
That's not valuable, right? That's not, and that's a tier. That's a tier that we pay for.
Exactly. So, I sorry to cut you off,
No,
but
please.
Case in point, I've just been dying. I visited Daft Mill 10 years ago, and it's just finally, you know what I mean? So I can get some Daft Mill, and but then I'm going to sit down with that sales rep a week from Friday and taste through their whole line. I mean, that's the courtesy, right? So if I'm going to open an account and take a certain, so I mean, I still do that, and I have a morbid curiosity about the marketplace always, you know what I mean? As it passes me by, what is it that people are interested in that I'm not offering, you know what I mean? But no, you're absolutely right that. Well, and that's and so you say well, how are you going to do it selling? It's just, what's fucking Diageo? I mean, it's well, we've got our tequila, we've got our bourbon, we've got our, and then now Diageo with a Dickel, and they take the three chamber rye and they start to blend it. I mean that moment is like wow, you know what I mean? It's like when the Velociraptor opens the door in Jurassic Park.
Really?
It's okay, they always get it.
Oh, exactly.
They always get it.
Exactly.
They always get it. So
exactly.
I mean, if I can grab a street corner where it's look, single origin booze is an agricultural product, like wine, like food. If you're interested in that, if you like to go to Kyoto or Copenhagen, or you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You like salvage denim, you like to drink fermented teas, you know what I mean? Then this is the booze for you. You look around. I mean, it's earth tones and blonde wood, and you know what I mean? It's it's a very specific demographic. So that's what I'm interested in. You know what I mean? What this is a Danish sweater, this is Japanese jeans. This is a Scottish hat.
Hey, welcome.
There you go. That's we all know where we like to shop. So we are DTC. We have the ability as of last week to start shipping legally. So hopefully we can grab a niche, and then someone will see, and then you'll get an injection of capital.
Brilliant.
Maybe even be acquired, if I were going to be perfectly honest. Because that seems to be, So, Blue Bottle Coffee, he's a classical musician. He starts roasting coffee in a countertop roaster. 15 years later, he sells to Nestle for $750 million.
Whoa.
Right. So that's not to say that's my goal. James has his own apprehensions about that. Whatever, like, it's, again. But there is something there. Do you know what I mean? There is an appetite for that move from bourbon to rye to mezcal, now to Destilado de Agave. Like, okay, well, now that George Clooney has a mezcal label in addition to a tequila label, like, well, how do we get away from this? Like, well, fuck certification altogether, declassified, right? I mean, in Scotland, it's crazy, you know. It's crazy. I want to talk more. I want to learn more about Scotland from you.
Well, yeah, I'll do my best. I want to use your wardrobe to get into your book.
Sure.
Because when you present in your book, you're in France and Cuba and Northern Ireland and Scotland and it's an incomplete Joshua Hatton list that I'm just making here, but my point
better
is
than most.
Right?
Most people read half of France.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
As you could always tell how far people have read. Well, who reads books anymore?
I absolutely loved it, and I've recommended it on the podcast previously.
Thank you.
And encouraged people to run out and buy it. And some of our listeners did and wrote in and said how much they enjoyed it. So, my wife bought it as a present. I thought, a restaurateur went around the world and then wrote about it. Like, thanks, baby.
Yeah.
And then she, you ever read that book? Okay. And then I cracked it. Within the first paragraph, I was in love. I honestly, I'm not bullshitting you.
It means the world.
It just took off. So you've got the world there. You're out exploring the world and finding these spirits. The same way you're out in the world picking up a sweater and a bonnet and a pair of jeans and you're living your life. Is the world that small to you, or are you aware of taking the time to go out and explore?
The latter, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, the latter for sure. I mean, I think you'd agree there's something about going to places it's just, and with spirits, it's so, and it's funny because so many times I've been somewhere and I've tasted something and I've been on a hill and breathing a certain air and I buy it and I come back and it's like, it tastes like shit at home. So there's a weird, but getting a sense of the context of
this is why we never buy casks while we're in the warehouse.
Exactly.
We always collect the samples and take them back to our offices and taste them under the same conditions as every other cask.
Exactly.
That's important.
Yeah, exactly. But I also don't believe in blind tasting. I mean, there has to be context. Like true blind tasting, I think, I know from experience, I'll always the thing with the most added sugar or the most, at any rate, because there's a the body has its own agenda, and it's going to react favorably to certain things on an animal level that, it's tasting is just endlessly interesting.
Yep, agreed.
Sorry, love traveling, love the sense of place. So yes, what I have at home is largely built of things that I fell in love with in various areas.
You still hit the nail on the head a second ago, and this is what we're trying to communicate to members of the nation, where we've gone to Westland. We've been at the Downtown Distillery. We've been at the warehouse when it was out in Hoquiam, right on the edge of the Olympic rainforest. We have just recently been up in Skagit Valley and visited the maltings and the WSU Bread Lab, which Dan Barber writes about in his book, right, The Third Plate, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. That's a good book.
Brilliant book as well,
yeah.
right? And then we're standing in a field with Matt Hoffman, and everything changes when you do all of that.
Yeah,
everything. But you got to sell the bottle that you selected to the consumer.
Yeah.
And you can't just rest it on, I had this kick-ass experience.
Yeah.
Right? I have to try and communicate some of that to you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it'll fail or succeed on what's in the bottle. And it's interesting when you're talking about being on a hill and there's a wind coming across and there's a view of the water. It's unbelievable. It's amazing. That's not what then ends up inside the bottle.
That's such a great point. And I thank you for reminding me of that. I need to remember that. The other, arguably more democratic aspect of it is the apparatus of taste. I mean, it is such an amazing thing to sit with someone and to taste something is just, it's so intimate. You know what I mean? Like this is in my mouth and it's in your mouth. Yeah. And I don't know if what you're experiencing is what I'm experiencing, and can we figure that out, or does it even matter? Right, because we are experiencing the same thing in our own truly subjective way. And what blows my mind is I've just spent so much time, and I know you have as well, sitting with people and saying and pouring one thing and pouring another thing and pouring another thing and pouring another thing. And there is something so democratic about taste that everyone inevitably says, "Oh, I'm terrible. I don't know what I'm doing." You know, just fucking relax. Let's taste a few things. Which one is the most interesting? And everyone, you know, if people settle down and they get into it's like sex. If you settle down and you get into your body and you relax and there's no expectation and you're okay as you are, you're gonna get there. Do you know what I mean? Like so it's always like, you know, some weird, you know, incredibly pale 54%. I mean, everyone's into overproof now, so I don't want to characterize myself that way. But you know, I remember like pre Diageo Kalila, like in a fourth fill, like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
Wow.
I was just saying this 2 days ago at tasting.
Like, wow. Yeah. And then, of course, what happens to Kalila? But it's just that much. So that's the other side of it. And you don't have to go anywhere for that. That's what's so fucking cool and it doesn't have to be like, this is great because, so in a way, the book, the consumption, the travel, it's a travelogue. It's a different thing. By the way, before I get, did you ever read the Ian Banks whiskey book? Disappointing. Yeah.
So it was on my first read. This is Raw Spirit you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I grew up reading Ian Banks.
Me too.
Loved him. Wasp Factory remains.
Oh my God,
incredible.
Wasp Factory, great. Yeah, actually, that should be revisited now, shouldn't it? Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want my kid to be reading that. But
yeah.
So when I first got Raw Spirit, I was super excited.
Me too.
Here comes Ian Banks, right? I never even finished it. No. I just kind of faded out. I revisited that maybe 5 years ago. It was much better.
I
much
wonder,
better
because that also the oh God, what's his name? I mean, one of my favorite English comedians, Alan Partridge.
Steve Coogan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you see this? The Steve Coogan.
Oh, the Trip.
Yeah.
And then the sequel. And
I was like, the stuff about food is shit, but the stuff about middle age is amazing. And I got to go back to that Ian Banks book.
Yes.
Because he's at a certain stage of his career.
Yes.
I believe he has kids, and you know what I mean. Like, well, now what? And I think he's just getting a big check for that book, probably.
Well, but he died like how long ago has Ian Banks died from cancer? Like 10 years now, 15 years.
Is that right?
And his partner married him like on his deathbed. I
honestly didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know if they did have kids. But the trouble for me with that book is it starts out just talking about these drives through the countryside.
And that's fucking
right?
Scotland, though.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And then...
Can I tell you about Scotland?
Please. Is it winding roads and sheep in the middle of those roads? And so he's doing the car thing, and it started out to me too much like Top Gear. And I'm not a Top Gear fan, right? And I was kind of like, But revisiting it, and he gets into friendships... And he gets into, again, people, right?
Yeah.
Take the cars out and put people in. And he talks about, busting his mate's balls, over a whiskey.
Yeah.
I definitely revisit it. I think it's worth your time.
I'm excited to hear that. By the way, I mean, Scottish writers in my early you ask about, the early 90s, like,
Yeah, right.
Ian Banks, Irvin Welsh.
Right.
I just like, wow.
Yeah, when Trainspotting came out, it was revolutionary.
Yeah.
Do you make a reference to Begbie in your book? No, I'm asking you like the tiniest detail here.
But Begbie, for me, that living in Ireland, I was living in Northern Ireland when and reading, reading Trainspotting, then Acid House, and then the other stuff, and then but at any rate, that's a character, that's a type of person you don't quite have over here. The kind of like the sort of the hard man, you know what I mean? And it was just like terrifying. That category of person is just fucking terrifying.
Absolutely.
So I don't think I mentioned him, but really instructive. So when I'm working as a bouncer and I'm like the concept of people getting, I talk about someone getting jarred. In the book, so that's probably why you think of Begbie.
There's four names that you mention, and I think one's Irving Welsh, and then Francis Begbie comes along at the end of the sentence. Because I remember thinking like there's and I think Sir Walter Scott you mentioned
for sure,
and then Ivanhoe. So those are the four names in the one sentence. But just when I got to the end of that sentence and there's Francis Begbie, I'm like, whoa!
That's right. Now I remember.
What's the Begbie reference here? But obviously you've got Begbie when he just tosses the glass over his shoulder and just hits the woman, and I thought they did a good job in the film, kind of showing that in the sound of that landing.
And the joy as he knows he's about to,
go downstairs and maybe get stabbed.
And encountering, as I'm tall, so that type often is looking for, they're looking for a trophy, they're looking for, so many times being in a pub and having someone just kind of like bump into me.
Absolutely. And I just had this conversation in the Idaho woods. We were morel hunting. I thought of you as I was morel hunting, thinking Thad would really dig this as well. And so we're out there and we're not finding anything. But one of the guys is 6'6", maybe. And we got into that conversation of who goes looking for you in a bar. My brother's 6'6".
You're tall as well. Yeah.
I'm only 6'2". And next to you, I was on my tiptoes. You're 6'8".
Yeah.
And so there's always a head there, right? And it's how do you diffuse that situation? Not how do you ramp it up?
And it's just And over there, it's just particularly if you're in kind of remote areas. And anyway, it's not. It's just an interesting. So he's very kind of allegorical in that sense. Begbie, like being we've all. Well, you haven't, but to be the naive American and to be in certain settings and like, hey, can't we all get how's it going? Like, hey, man, like,
right.
And there's a kind of cynicism and darkness, and there's just that's what's so fucking crazy, especially in Scotland and Northern. Not to unite,
but that's also in the book, right?
Subtext.
When the American tourist walks in with a big orange puffer jacket and the camera hanging from his neck, and he walks into the bar in Leith, and he's hey boys, can I use the bathroom?
Right. That's literally a scene out of Trainspotting.
Right, and they all just look at each other.
Right.
And he goes in, and then they follow him in, and that's that moment of having your head turning. Right. Be aware of where you are. Be aware of where you're walking. Had it this morning, right? I was saying to my Uber driver, like, I mapped this. I was going to just walk down here for my accommodation. And then we're driving through the heart of the Tenderloin. And I'm like 6'2" white Scotsman, right, shining white, with a suitcase rolly, recording equipment, my laptop. I'm like, how's your jeune am I, right? I'll just walk through San Francisco and go visit Thad. Like, I would have shit a brick if I turned a corner into that.
That was you were here in 19. Wasn't that the beauty of this town? Is it's small and walkable, and you'll get some exercise on the hills.
Right. I walked home last night. I was down in Financial District, walked up into Chinatown. It felt like walking through Glasgow, right? Just tight hills. I'm going up. My thighs are screaming. My quads are screaming. I'm a wee bit drunk. And I'm just taking wrong turns. And last night I was like, this is pretty awesome. I'm really digging this. This morning would have brought me back to reality.
It's just a bummer. It's a bummer.
So before we completely derail, and I do apologise for my own contribution, a question that I absolutely wanted to ask you when I was reading your book and then revisiting it for this interview. You are so incredibly honest in this book, and you talk in the book about, potential for adoption and what you and your wife are going through in trying to start a family. You go through the sleepless nights, which check is going to bounce while I'm off doing this. How did you make that decision? Or maybe you didn't, right? Maybe it's just in you. How did you come to be that honest and that transparent in the book?
Well, I found the act of writing super cathartic. The stress was, like I said, I was diabetic. I weighed 50 pounds more than I do now. I was just carrying a lot of stress. And like a lot of us, I think I had always thought. Anyway, just to start, writing is a therapeutic exercise, as I'm sure you've experienced. So I was just generating stuff. I had to generate copy because we sold the book, and then I had to write the book, and I had an editor. And so I was just like, what felt best to get out was what was going on. And it's just so much of my life for 10 years were these amazing transformative trips that were escape, and then the reality of the material reality of making the business work. And you're generous and astute to keep asking, well, how do you make it work? It's like, how do you turn this beautiful stuff into a living? But shorter answer is, I just wrote some of that stuff, and the editor said more, and so there was a real. And I think that I sort of deceived myself that what I write is not necessarily what will go in the book, and so I kind of let myself just write. You know what I mean, in that sense, and so that's how. And the stuff about adoption still feels like, basically like I'm mad at my mommy and my, it just feels like it's very embarrassing. You know what I mean? Like, which I'm told is probably a sign that there's, it's worth it. Like, what does that have to do? Having a shit day and being angry at your mom because of some aspect of the adoption process because you can't conceive. And anyway, it's just, but it's those. I believe that when you taste something beautiful or you're in a beautiful place, there are no transformative high points of life without the fucking squalid mediocrity of life. You know what I mean? There's not one without the other, and that's the beauty of the human condition. I don't want to say that this was like, I'm going to set out to capture this, or even to be so arrogant as to say that I have. Sure. But it's just like the transformative, beautiful moments, and the both are. We're here to enjoy both. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
But you have a moment in here where, you've been snippy to your stepfather.
Oh yeah,
Lester.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, and I guarantee you he'll listen to this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you've got that moment where you're basically describing your inner monologue to the reader, and saying like, why did I love this man dearly? He laughed in a way, and I snapped. Like, what the fuck is wrong with me?
Yeah.
Like, but you're sharing that with the reader. Yeah. And that's the inner monologue stuff that you didn't have to. Yeah. But was that a way for you to kind of explore yourself again?
Of course.
And say, like, why did I do? Because
of course,
you seem like a lovely man, and we're having a lovely time. And I already sent you a heart emoji today.
Yes.
So we got off to a great start before meeting.
Made my day.
But do you vacillate between that?
For sure.
Here's the guy who's always on and raising money and talking to the board, and here's the guy who's able to kick the desk today. Or were you ever a wall puncher growing up?
Did punch wall a couple times. Yeah. There was a hole in plaster as a teenager. But no, you keep answering the questions more concisely than I, and in the way I would like to, which is, it was a selfish exercise. I didn't know when I'd get to write a book again, and I definitely took it as an opportunity to understand my work and myself better. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, absolutely.
But for me, that's why it works, right?
Thank you.
Like I'm saying, when I look at this and it's restaurateur travels the world talking about his adventures, it would be easy to go down the path of only the good shit, right? The Facebook life, the Instagram life, right? I'm no longer on social media. When I was,
oh, good for you.
I would try to post the other stuff, right? Especially on Facebook. Here's something shitty my kid did today, or here was my shitty response to something shitty my kid did today, right? Instagram was maybe a little harder to put that out there, but
it's impossible,
right?
It's impossible
by design.
Yeah, people are like, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
And then to go into that kind of Instagrammable side of living, it would be easy to write that book that says this is sunshine and roses constantly, and on the home front, it's all great and my professional, and you didn't do that. And like the trip that you were mentioning earlier with Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon, like Steve Coogan, and I know he's playing a version of himself.
I hear it's accurate.
Right, right. He's not afraid to present himself as the asshole.
Exactly.
Or the guy who's going through things. He's fighting with middle age and, trying to, and successfully hooking up with the young woman on the front desk, right?
Yeah.
Like atrocious behavior that we're rejecting in 2023 that we were rejecting when that was coming up. But he uses that to say, I'm imperfect, right?
Yeah.
Now, isn't that a wonderful corollary to the spirits that we imbibe as well, right? And I know one of the things you rail against in the book is this consistent factory manufactured potato head. I love when you said that earlier. Potato head, mash bill, yeast, production. But isn't it sometimes wonderful to get access to the imperfect? Like the Craigellachie that's meaty, maybe too meaty. A Ben Nevis in a sherry cask that's maybe gone a bit farty or a bit matchsticky, right?
Right.
Like, I love those moments. It doesn't have to be clean and crisp and precise all the time. Like, go and explore it a little bit. And do you ever consider that on your?
Absolutely. Like, what the fuck is going on with this one? Or like, all the examples you give. Right. Imperfections are. That's not even the right word, but that's, you learn so much from like, what is that? And if you can taste with someone that can explain to you the aspect of production, and so much of it is if you're tasting through scores of casks, it's like, especially in Scotland when you've got like all your first, second, third fill, different woods and different sizes, and it's like, it's just like, oh man, it's endless. Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's so interesting is like, we saw in natural wine, everyone got interested in that exact thing. I have so many friends in the wine trade who hate natural wine because they're just, there are all of these perfect wines with great typicity that, and now all anyone wants to drink is like, volatile acidity and accidental carbonation, and you know what I mean? Like, and that's why, because it's like, it brings you into how was it made and why was it made and where was it made? And it's like, oh, so those, what we might call flaws, they're so instructive, and they pull you into the whole, history of the wine from when it was in the earth to when it was in your glass. So I think tasting through the evolution of the product, mistakes or unusual aspects are really what can be so instructive. So absolutely, you say it perfectly. But I'm sort of waiting for people in spirits to have the same, like, don't you want to taste? And I think, don't you want to taste something unusual? You know what I mean? But not quite yet. And a big part of it is that sort of the illusion of cask bottlings that's happening with now every bourbon producer has their own single cask program, and it's just sort of like that IPA-ification of it. You know what I mean? So it's hard to find people like. Is it smooth? You know, no. You know what I mean?
You're right.
You know,
it's spiky. It's wonderful. Give it a try.
Yeah.
Go and explore some other aspect of that.
I keep waiting for that curiosity to proliferate as it has in wine, or even sours. There's a moment in beer. Fermentation, that was very, very fashionable. But it very quickly gets subsumed back into this kind of like, in the United States, just this cleanliness and this uniformity, and so
consistency, replicability, you bring Mark Watt into the book, and Mark Watt is a very, very dear friend.
Oh, I was hoping you knew him. I was
very
just
dear. You say the most wonderful thing about him. You say, "I've met him before. Or about to meet him again, all the jokes are going to be the same. And I don't care. That's part of the charm." Mark is a regular listener of the podcast.
Oh, well, hello, Mark. You're one of the greatest people I've ever met in this business. Yeah.
He's masterful, absolutely masterful. He's a wonderful fellow. But I just thought you captured him so well. And I think when I was reading this, I was only just back from Campbelltown, or I was just about to go to Campbelltown. And when you get there in the book and you're about to go see Mark, it made everything personal, for me in the book. And you talk about Raymond at Bruichladdich when you saw him, and I'm not friendly with him, but anytime I'm at the distillery, there's Raymond. How you doing? What's the latest? What's the news? And he's got a line that you quoted in the book, which is, to afford all of Bruichladdich lineup when they were still kind of reopening and discovering what they were, Raymond said you'd have to be a fucking billionaire. Yeah. And that's in the book. And I thought, that's so perfectly captured as well. So what it did for me was, you were so precise in two of the people that I knew personally, that it made me feel like the rest of these people you were presenting, I fully trusted you. Like, if he got these two so accurate that I know, I bet those ones that I don't know are accurate. And it made me feel, and I hope this is the right word, but it made me feel so safe in your book. Again, not the restaurateur going around the world waxing lyrical, right? It was like, no, he's capturing people. Yeah. He's understanding people. He's listening to people. And I think that is commendable. I think the way you did that was really impressive. So you should pat yourself on the back for that.
Thank you. It means the world to me, because Mark, and I don't know that he would ever understand. And talking about that, like, just being the dumb American, and he has to just do this for a living, and just over and over and over and over again. And it's amazing, but so instructive to taste in that warehouse with him a couple of times, like, incredible.
There was one more question that I wanted to ask you, or at least that I wanted to make sure I covered before I get out of here. And now I've been thinking about Mark Watt. Mark Watt was one of our original episodes. We're in our 7th season of this podcast, and he was like episode 2 or 3. I always forget the exact number. While he was still with Cadenheads. And we've had people industry people tell us, they will go to that episode with a new hire, and they'll say, listen to this interview. Listen to Mark Watt there. You will know 80-90% of everything we need you to know if you listen to Mark Watt there.
I'm not kidding. No kidding.
It's absolutely phenomenal.
It's in his blood. I mean, that's the story of Macallan, and he was born at Macallan.
Right.
It's hilarious. I mean, the trade. I mean, the trade is so beautiful, and it's such a trade. You know what I mean? Scotch, that's the mercantilism of Scotch is so, it's its own aesthetic, like moving this shit around in different containers, and it's so amazing. It's just endless, and I just feel like, God, if people, it's so interesting, and you're interested in this and you're interested in that, if you could just get a little more interested, it would blow your mind. You know what I mean? And then you wouldn't need the umpteenth expression of Lafroig or Lagavulin, or it's just and it's that humanity that is being just like forced out of the trade. You know what I mean?
That's exactly it. Exactly. Which then gets a little concerning as we discover new categories and they then get bigger.
Yeah.
And how does our discovery and sharing of them squeeze the humanity out of what they had?
Yeah.
Like in some instances, in so many places you've gone, if we can help people help themselves out of poverty, right? What a brilliant thing, right? But oh shit, now we've got you mass producing something that was incredibly delicate. But I don't think we should keep you in poverty so that we can keep having that artisanal spirit. Like, that seems like a mistake in the other direction. And we're back to balance again, right?
Yeah.
It's not grow or die. It's what's a meaningful level of sustainability here.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we need to grapple with. That's the part we need to get right.
No, it's true. It's such an interesting question. It wasn't a question; it was a statement, but it was yet another astute statement. But I think of like two places. I think of Oaxaca, and I think of France. And France, there is this, like cognac, like it's in so many ways it's my least favorite and my most favorite spirit. But you have the four big houses, basically everyone just grows and sells to them. They add a shitload of caramel. They age stuff 2 years in God knows what, throw caramel in it, call it a VS and sell it, in those neighborhoods you're walking through. But there's this stability in cognac that you don't see in any other producing area, where cognac producers, they sell he may sell his whole load to Hennessy every year, but, he's got a Citron and he takes a vacation and there's a kind of stability that you have to, and everyone likes it, and everyone loves caramel, everyone loves, it does well. So that's like 300 years in, right? So in a way the category is destroyed. It's very hard to get people to drink grower producer cognac that has no added boisé or caramel. You know what I mean? This is very, very hard. Just very, and it's all Uni Blanc and it's not that interesting. You know what I mean? So, but there is stability in that region, but arguably these are all landowners, and anyway, it's complicated. But it just brings to mind those you know what I mean. Not everyone can be a revolutionary distiller, telling everyone to fuck off and making their own. I don't know if you've encountered the French natural booze people. You encounter them at all?
No.
Oh, it's really funny. They're sort of like, there's a manifesto, and I'll send you a link.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, very earnest, young and earnest. You remember the Dogma film?
Wow, yeah, a long time ago.
Sure. Remember the Dogma manifesto? You will not use artificial light. You will not use, it's very much like that. And everything else is bullshit. Yeah. So that, I tend to move in that direction and alienate people, and it's like, what are you? It's just a drink. You know what I mean? So, sorry.
Balance, right? It's all balance.
So not everyone can be like that. And it's, I've suffered at the instability of this business. So I totally understand. And then you see in Oaxaca, the other region, where tequila is dead, much in the way that cognac is kind of dead. It's just co-opted. It's owned by, the big four own everything. And that's it. And NOMs, they're all, it's just like a bunch of MGDs where it's like I make 45 different tequilas for 45 different labels. And you know the drill. Yep. But in Oaxaca, I say Oaxaca, but with mezcals and now just declassified destillados, you're seeing a really kind of revolutionary and inspiring sort of movement. They're all very competitive with each other, so there's not this kind of cohesion. That's my experience.
Okay.
But everyone, they're sort of like enough. You know what I mean? I'm tired of watching George Clooney make a mezcal, and as long as it's certified as a mezcal, no one cares because it's going to be marketed, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was starting. So tequila that had been blown out. Like Paul Mitchell likes this, so he's going to buy it and sell it. It doesn't matter. So we switch who makes it over and over and over again. We can, with bourbon. So at any rate, but we're seeing producers saying like, fuck that. This is my production. I don't even need the certification. It's super cool. Yeah. Super cool.
But then what do you do with that wild sourced agave that yields, a run of 60 bottles that you're then coming out and telling that story, and we're back to that scalability again, but it's not even to the point of how do you sell this consistently, but how do you make it worth your while bringing that into the 3-tier / 4-tier system, putting that out for, $250 a bottle to make sure everyone gets a fair cut, fair representation.
That's why I love that. Like, I love it when the New York Times has an article about, we tasted 20 mezcals, all between $30 and $60 a bottle. Like, fuck you, you're destroying. You think you're being unpretentious, you know what I mean? You think, yeah, you think you're being like man of the earth, but you're being a fucking asshole. Like, you're totally devaluing the whole industry and championing the people that are fucking destroying it. It's sort of like, I just always remember, like, give me Pabst Blue Ribbon, like, oh, we don't have Pabst Blue, oh, pretentious asshole, like, what are you saying? Like, if anyway, it's just that kind of how they succeed in marketing. Like, well, anything expensive is bullshit. Anything expensive is pretentious. Anything expensive is that self-righteous rejection of anything. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, so if you if you buy a $250 bottle of something, it'll last you 15 fucking years. You can have a half ounce by the fire, and it'll transform a whole evening. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, lift your spirit, right?
Right. And you'll buy 45 cases of Bud Light, and you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you'll get more units of alcohol. Right. But what's a unit of alcohol? And anyway,
who the hell knows?
Yeah, you get what I'm saying.
I'm not on board with that one. But I think that if you've...
sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish.
To answer your question, there's a stewardship of the single wild agave. Yeah, I mean, that stuff really should cost at least $500 a bottle. Right. And it basically doesn't exist anymore. But they are the stewardship of the agriculture of agave is something that, we grow only from seed, and we grow only varieties that are of this region, and we ferment a certain way. And there is a kind of, hey, these are all productions. These are all man-made, human-made things. Mm-hmm. So the ways in which they're like, it's going to grow, it's already outgrown that kind of agrarian mythology, right? But it doesn't mean it has to become like Scotch or cognac, right?
Yes.
So this is of the region. We are taking seeds from you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Because that's the heartbreaking thing about Scotch is there's no. And Scotch trades on it so beautifully. I mean, I love the map of Scotland and the Highlands and the Lowlands and the Space Time. Like, okay, it's all the same, and they're turning dials to create the illusion of it. But even though there will be often a different still and a different water source, but the same malt, the same, you know what I mean? Yeah. Even those two aspects of place will make a real difference. But sorry, the region, I just can't, I mean, I wonder what it was like 200 years ago, Scotch, you know what I mean? Where you go into a pub in the middle of, on Orkney and you taste the thing,
Probably pretty rough and ready and probably burned all the way down. And was that real stuff that people think, I was commenting on this the other night about people making the whiskey face, in a movie or a TV show. And I'm like, it's 40% alcohol, it's 60% water, like... Grow up, there's nothing attached to that. But I think that old stuff would have had you doing the whiskey face.
That's a very good point. That makes me think
about
about the whiskey face a different way.
right.
Not only is it 40% alcohol, but it's distilled to
right.
84%. Like it's
right. The proof,
yeah.
right. And so, but you actually just gave me the perfect in there, and I'm a couple points, and I remembered the one that I forgot when I started talking about Mark, which is classic when you start thinking about Mark. Have you had a chance to read Dave Broom's new book, A Sense of Place? That has it's kind of like a photojournalistic piece.
I haven't. I will say that his rum book was super transformative for me long ago, and the Japanese whiskey book is super cool. Like he's one of my favorite writers, I haven't, so I'm excited to
make time for it because he's. And we've been talking about it a little bit, and I do not want to belabor the point here because I think we've suggested it as we've gone along, and I'm going to leave the listener to feel suitably informed there. But terroir is making its way into whiskey conversations, and we're starting to ask people along the way, like, what do you think? Like, put your stall out. Where are you on that? And I think that's the part I think we've covered well today. But there's a way Dave Broom talks about a sense of place, that talks about people, that talks about artisans, that talks about a production technique that, while is replicatable, I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I've now said it twice and I'm nervous each time. Can it be replicated, right? He goes to Ardnamurchan, right? Yeah, okay, what are you doing here? How are you doing it?
I haven't been there yet.
Right?
Yeah.
Well worth your time.
Is
well worth it.
I can't tell, like you read it, is this bullshit or is this awesome?
No, I think it's the real deal. I think they're doing a lot of things right.
Yeah.
But then they've got the sea right there and a bay and the coast and your Lefroigs and your Lagavulins, some of your Highland Parks, not all, that are being matured outside Glasgow, right? And we're saying like, oh, you can taste the sea.
Maritime.
Yeah, it crossed it in a tanker and went to Glasgow and got filled into casks and hasn't really seen the sea in its life.
Yeah.
But there is something there. There is a salinity going on, the distillate that I still love.
Diageo malting is right on the coast.
Right there. And so, but, and things are changing there as well. How the contracts are being fulfilled. But
interesting.
Right? But to the point, there is a sense of place, right? You can see the sense of place. You can meet the people who are producing it and rolling the casks, and Ardnamurchan are storing right there. And I think you and I, again, reading the book and talking to you today, I think you and I are continually vacillating between how do we find that small producer doing something really well, and how far up the ladder are we willing to go on economies of scale? I'm still buying my Lefroigs, I'm still buying my Lagavulins, I'm still very much a part of that end. But you talk about Avenderg in the book, right? And there's a teeny tiny. I have not. Oh. I have not been there. Yeah. I have been with Francis at Daft Mill.
Yeah.
And gone through that.
Oh, it's like seeing a ghost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I don't think, this is why I was kind of asking you the mezcal question a second ago, or the agave question, is I don't think we can build a Scottish industry on the back of Avenderg and Daft Mill, right? There needs to be that compromise to the Rose Isles and the Girvan plant that has Ailsa Bay inside of it. And it's just always searching out that balance, and where can we reside, and where can we be proud of what we're presenting to people, whichever country it comes from.
Agreed.
How can we be proud of that and talk to the people who made it? And I know you're on board with that, and I know you communicated that in your book and in your I don't want to say concept in case that's a rude word, but
no, it's fine. But just don't say expression. Right.
And how you present your work with Bar Agricole and others that you've developed, right? That's what I see when I look at you and I read your words, and that's where I wish you success, because we're grappling with the same things.
Yeah. Can I respond to that?
Absolutely. I know there's not a question again, but we're just having a conversation.
No, because it's so accurate, and it's so, and I know we've touched on this, but wine is an accident, right? Like wine will happen no matter what, but spirits, human beings have to be involved, and they have to be by definition. It cannot happen by accident. So there's something really they are industrial. They are made.
Yeah.
So that aesthetic of like, hey, I just throw some grapes in a bucket and here we go the wine. Look at that. It's just like it doesn't exist. So it's a different aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
So it's like human. There is no non-interventionist spirit,
right?
So exactly like, well,
that's well said.
And that's so like, okay, so what has the human being done here?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating, and it's sort of getting on the level of like, well, a cask that's farty, or what I mean, or like, so I agree. And then it's also the mercantilism, to use a word I've already used, but of spirits. It's so like it connects us. It only really starts to connect us, you and me, in our different countries, when it becomes a product and it becomes traded. So I'm much less cynical about. I mean, I need to make a living that way, but where do you fall on that spectrum? And I agree. So, and I think so many people actually are quicker to that aesthetic, that the 19th century or even 18th century, like this is fresh off a clipper ship, and the Medford rum, and I have a lump of sugar, and there's limes from Peru, and what is it? You know what I mean? Like that kind of. It's mercantilism and it's industry, and it's there. And coffee is that way also. Like it's like
chocolate
commodities market. There's. I find all of that beautiful, and that's novels and films and histories, and I agree that you're so right to end in championing that aesthetic. And it would be a mistake with spirits to say all we should drink is Abendjerg, because they don't make enough, and they love not selling it to you,
right,
which is so funny.
All right, last question, we're out of here. This is an easy peasy one. That has me an easier question to you. Or maybe it won't be. Are we getting another book out of you?
Oh, I would like to, 100%. I think it's the thing I would most like to do. Yeah. Trying to get the work to a stability to pitch another book, honestly. Yeah. So, for sure. And I think I'd like to, talk more. I mean, this business is just, there's a lot of, it's just a messy business. I think there's more to be, and like, I don't know, during this, these shows, it's just there's more and more of these shows, like you say, and these books of like Stanley Tucci eating carbon, like this kind of just rhapsodic bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, and I think Anthony Bourdain's suicide is something that needs to be considered. I think that I feel sad for him because I think he was in so much pain. But there hasn't been another. Not to imply that I'm that voice, because that voice is so beautiful. But that sort of like, how do you talk about what's beautiful while being honest? And it's probably worth trying again. But I like the act of writing. What about you?
I would love to. I've wanted to write a book for 20 years.
I'd read it.
And spend so much time on the day-to-day business.
Yeah, it's incredible.
You don't get a writing day. And then my kids are now 16 and 13. For the last 16 and 13 years, that hasn't been an easy ride. No. And I remember reading Raymond Carver, would write short stories at night when his kids went to bed. Right. I did want to ask you a more geeky question. It doesn't have to be on the record here. But his editor has kind of come more to the fore as the years have gone along.
Yeah, well, it was actually me.
Right. And you see what Raymond Carver was sending in, and then you see the edits that were being made. And when you mentioned an editor earlier, I was like, did your editor tease out of you what you wanted? You said, well, we sent them this, and that was well received, and so I kept writing more of that stuff. Did you feel like you ended up being the person on the page? Did you
very much so.
Have a role in that?
No, very much so. Her name is Emily Timberlake, by the way. And no, it was I can't believe how little it was shaped. And I was probably being more diffident than I should. But I was like, well, fuck it. Who knows when I'll get to do this again? Like you said, I don't know why everything lined up. Like I had certain quality of employee and people were running different places. And it's like, I just go to the coffee shop and I'd write for 4 hours twice a week. It's just like, God, now it just sounds like such bliss. Right? Yeah. Like I said,
the young family, the end of the night, the balance in the books. Right?
Yeah.
It's a lot, man.
It's hard. So, I'd written enough. I'd had enough of a writing practice to know that shit has to line up, and it's lined up now. And I've sold a book, and you know that's rare, and to sell too, who knows? So I did selfishly make. You know, you always think I could have done more. I could have done. Yeah, sure. And there's talking about like trade and. You know, but they needed me to finish it, and I'm late. You know, distracted, and as we're all busy. But you know that my timeliness for me and punctuality and stuff like that, historically difficult. Anyway, long story. I would love to know. I was like, really, this is what we're going to sell because it felt this is what we're going to print. But it felt pretty raw and pretty personal, and not like the kind of thing that you described, where you know like. Isn't this the life? You know what I mean? Like,
well, you write it, I'll be reading it.
Oh, likewise. I'm not blowing smoke. I've loved your take on the industry, and I look forward to talking to you again. Yeah,
you can expect many more heart emojis coming from me.
Likewise, I hope we can. This can be the beginning of a friendship. Is
100%
cool,
absolutely.
Great.
Which is what I got from your book, right? That you were writing about friends who are in the industry, producing. 100%.
Beautiful.
Don't be a stranger. I'm excited to darken your door again.
Likewise,
and thanks a million for today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers, brother.
Huge thanks, not just to Thad Vogler. But to Jason for doing the one-man show. He's so good with his interviewing. Listen, can we say this quietly? Maybe he won't listen if we just kind of whisper in ASMR hushed tones. I honestly think that Jason is one of the best interviewers out there. Period. I think he's so inquisitive, and I mean, granted, it helps when you've got a good, interviewee like Thad and some of the others that Jason has spoken with. But he's so inquisitive, and he doesn't take notes. He takes mental notes, and he's so good at calling back to some of the things that the interviews have spoken about, and he's so good about not having an end point and just allowing the conversation to just go where it needs to go depending on the content of it. And so, listen, I'm done complimenting him because that's just way too many compliments.
That was touching. I'm welling up here. So, We need to have made him a prize. I feel like you should be handing him an award at the end of this sentence. I'm absolutely not disagreeing with you. In fact, I'm frightened by how he interviews because I feel like it's very reassuring. You're listening along being like, that is a great question. I would have loved to have thought of that. Do you think he was secretly trained in espionage? You know, that kind of like, I feel like you could have a conversation with Jason and walk away being like, oh, I gave him all of the state secrets. Whoops.
All of them. Well, you left him in your bathroom. That's the problem.
Yeah. I keep doing that.
But listen, enough talking about Jason. I've got a really important question for you, Jess.
Okay, let's do it.
We were talking about the trip before.
We were.
Right? Steve Coogan, Rob Brydon. In the first movie, and also in the TV show, because wasn't the first movie sort of a condensed version of the series?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So in that movie, there's this great scene. I think it may be the first restaurant they go to where they are trading their Michael Caine impressions.
Oh, no. I'm worried
And
that you're
now
walking
that I'm
into a trap here.
wearing my Michael Caine glasses, and everybody knows that my name is Michael Caine, I would love to hear, and you know, I would argue, Jess, that the listeners want to hear Jessica Rabbit Lomas's own Michael Caine impression.
This is horrendous. I honestly... She's going to get me removed from my own country.
You don't have to. Like, don't feel pressured, but everybody wants to hear it. Everybody.
I don't actually think I could do it, Mike. Are you wanting the classic line?
I think you could do that because that, I mean, it really is a shortcut. I can't, outside of saying, my name is Michael Caine, and say, which is terrible, and saying something about blow the bloody doors off. Like, it's all terrible, but like, think of a line.
I feel like this podcast has taken a terrible turn. These listeners are not here to hear me not be able to do my own accent.
We took a terrible turn in season 1. Like, we're just...
Well, actually, if the listeners go back to season 1, they can hear my excellent American accent, which develops out of literally nowhere.
Oh, that's right. That was the Jubilee episode, right?
Yeah. I honestly, you had to send me the time codes. I didn't recognize myself. Which... That's great. Okay, Michael Caine. That's that famous line, isn't it, from the Italian Job? You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. Which is pretty... I feel like I could do better. If I'd had some drinks. If you'd warm me up and let me have like 5 pints of something first.
All right.
What did you say? My name is Michael Caine. I can't do London. Oh, that's not good.
I've not heard your Michael Caine, but I assume it would be something along the lines of, my name's Michael Caine.
That is where you are so wrong. And you can look at my live video for proof, because that's the very thing I don't do. I say that he used to talk like that.
Do you Michael Caine?
Okay. I say Michael Caine used to talk like this in the 1960s, right? But that has changed. And I say that over the years, Michael's voice has come down several octaves. Let me finish. And all of the cigars and the brandy don't let me finish. Can now be heard.
Okay.
I've not fucking finished in the back of the voice. And the voice now. I've still not finished. The voice.
Well, you're panicking.
Because you look like you're about to bloody talk. Let me finish.
Before we hit record, you said you had a bit of news to share with people on the ROW side, rest of the world side. Yeah. Is it enough to call the Paperboy?
Well, I don't get to interrupt the Paperboy sleep very often, so, you know. I am also a big sister, and that seems like an obnoxious kind of thing big sisters do. So I say, yeah, go ahead, give him a little prod. You're like, wake up.
I think you gave him the prod he needs.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy in trouble!
So, my Paperboy announced news was really about places that you can find SCN if you happen to be in the UK. There is a fantastic whiskey festival that I will be pouring whiskey and selling some of our lovely new bottles and maybe some archive stock that I'll sneak along.
All right.
And this is called the Northeast Indie Whiskey Festival, and that's in Newcastle. It's set up by a guy called Carl, who has a fantastic group on Facebook that I recommend everybody joins, even if you're not in the Northeast. And they run a great whiskey festival. It's also in a brewery, so who doesn't want to be at a whiskey festival in a brewery? It's too good an offer to refuse. So Carl's group, they have organised this festival, which I think this is their second, maybe third, but they've he approached me last year and we didn't have any of our stock. It didn't work. So I will be taking our lovely new ROW bottles to Newcastle. So I recommend that you go and check them out. That is on Saturday the 2nd of September. September is a very busy month for whiskey things because we'll be doing a quick flit to Newcastle and then I'm going to come home and then I'm going to head off to Maltstock for a very relaxed weekend.
Very relaxed.
Very relaxed. Don't ask me what I'm taking with me. 1, because maybe I don't know yet. And 2, that's not a very relaxed thing to do to ask somebody. So, have I said relaxed enough yet for tune? So that's in the Netherlands. For those of you, I don't know how, if you're in the whiskey community and you haven't seen the aggressive graffitiing of the Maltstock team, who are currently, as we're recording, I think they're here in Campbelltown. They'll be sticking those flyers up everywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Like in all good children's fairy tales where they leave like crumbs for trails. In Tune's case, it's just endless flyers for Maltstock. That's how you know they've been there.
Flyers that say relax. You just follow all the flyers that say relax, and you'll find your way to the Maltstock camping ground.
Yeah, I would like to see them in airports, just encouraging people to relax as they're heading to Maltstock through one of the most stressful airports in the world. So that is the 8th to the 10th of September. So for those single cask nation friends who are not in the UK but want to do some single cask nation drinking, so that's that weekend. I am also hosting an event here in just outside of Glasgow. To those of you who have been travelling through Scotland, it's a restaurant that's getting real notoriety. It's called The Artisan, and it's in Wishaw. For those of you who have come to Glasgow and asked Glaswegians about a famous whiskey restaurant in Wishaw, I apologise in advance for the look that you will get from most people. Wishaw is not the most highly regarded tourist destination on the West Coast, but Derek and his team run a fantastic restaurant, and they have one of the biggest whiskey collections and open whiskey collections I think you can drink and work your way through. He's got a great whiskey Padawan. Raf is helping to put everything on QR codes so that the poor souls don't have to keep updating whiskey menus, so it's great. And it's got you'll have seen pictures of their whiskey lounge. It's phenomenal. Like, the amount of whiskey they have is unbelievable. And it now
focus on Bruichladdich, right?
Yeah, so Derek is like a massive Bruichladdich collector, fan, supporter, creator of Octomore barbecue sauce. Also, he is the cause of mischief when he works with James Brown at Octomore Farm, and they release these Octomore Farm bottlings. And for the Friends of Bruichladdich group that Derek runs, along with his pal Ian Garrett, they release regular bottles. So maybe even listeners of the podcast will have talked to me in my non-single cask nation hat, because I ship a good chunk of those bottles for the Friends of Bruichladdich group as well. So that reminds me, there are bottles pending, waiting. So if you're sat waiting for those and you're waiting for me to respond, I will be in touch, I promise, next week. So there's a dinner on the 20th of September, which is a Wednesday, and that will be single cask nation. So you can admire the Bruichladdich bottles, but really they're, for me, my very excellent jokes. I promise I won't do any more impressions. And Derek does a great dinner, 3-course dinner. So that's definitely one. If you're travelling at that time, if you're on your way to Campbelltown or Islay, take a detour, come and have dinner in the Artisan. You will, I promise, not leave hungry. Not possible. You have to have the sticky toffee pudding because it is amazing. And there's, like I say, this crazy selection of drams to be had, and some local beers too.
Amazing.
And gins. He's got quite a lot of gin as well. If you're wanting a gin pause in the middle of your whiskies. So that's where we send people to the Artisan. And then I guess at the end of the month, because I've not done enough whiskey things in September, I'm going to go to the London Whisky Show. So we won't have a table, but maybe if you come and say hi, maybe I'll have a sneak preview of something I could tell you about.
I like
maybe
that.
I'll think about whether or not I'll get thrown out of London Whisky Show for promising that kind of thing. You should just come and say hi. That would be nice. Come and say hello instead. So that's my whiskey-ish news. And behind the scenes, I'm just going to live in a suitcase for the whole of September. And then I'm going to bin everything to save me having to put it away.
I'm trying to figure out, like, if you're bringing whiskey around with you and you're sneaking it into the Whisky Show London, do you just, like, hide casks in your socks?
Yeah, regularly. One under each armpit. They look like swimming flotation devices. And then, because it is by the river, so, like I say, it's by the Thames. I actually, now I've said that, please don't ban me from the whiskey show. If you're not allowed to bring things, what have I done? Just come say hi to me. I don't promise to have any whiskey on me. How about that? But yeah, that's the end of the month. September sounds busy. I'll have to take another holiday.
It does sound busy, but that's all right. You'll have a slightly freer October, I think.
Until I fill it with things. Yeah, and behind the scenes, we are quietly working on a next ROW release, but I am not telling you nothing about that. Mainly because our regular correspondents in Chicago, the Nolans, tend to write these things that I spuriously say on the podcast down, and then they hold me to them. And I was unaware that by being on this podcast, I was entering into some sort of legal contract, so I'm saying nothing. But it's going to be good. That's all I can tell you.
I don't have any U.S. news, but I did have an email that I wanted to bring up.
Excellent.
And I thought that this one would be good to bring up with you specifically because I think part of it can potentially touch on logistical things, like not necessarily shipping stuff that you're very familiar with, but like the way that this is discussed, I think it might fit with the way your brain may work in certain instances.
Okay.
So if that makes sense. So this is an email that we got from Dr. Matt Bishop.
Oh, the lovely Dr. Matt Bishop.
And the subject says, looking to the future. And he says, Dear Jason and Joshua, and we have to assume that Jess is in there as well.
Obviously.
He failed us twice. He put Jason's name first, and he forgot your name altogether.
I'm so offended. Right? Especially as I'm currently sat looking on the wall at some very lovely whiskey cards that he made and brought to me at Glasgow Whiskey Festival. They're actually sat above my desk here. But maybe now, having committed such a faux pas in the email,
I wouldn't. Whatever action you take, I wouldn't blame you, Jess.
I've got faith he can correct these hideous mistakes in his opening gambit.
So, he says, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm writing to you today to discuss the potential use of AI technology in the future of whiskey production in different countries. As you know, the whiskey industry is a global one, with distilleries located all over the world. As such, there are a variety of factors that can affect the production of whiskey, from climate to the type of grains used. AI technology has the potential to revolutionize the whiskey industry in a number of ways. For example, AI can be used to, and now we have a bulleted list. 1. Optimize the production process. And then a little description here. AI can be used to analyze data on everything from the weather to the fermentation process to identify areas where efficiency can be improved. This can lead to lower costs and higher quality whiskey. 2. Create new flavors. AI can be used to analyze data on thousands of different whiskey recipes to identify new flavor combinations that have never been tried before. This could lead to the creation of new and innovative whiskey products. And then his final bullet here is personalize whiskey for individual consumers. AI can be used to analyze data on a person's taste preference to create a whiskey blend that is perfectly tailored to their individual taste. This could lead to a more personalized and engaging whiskey experience. We're almost done here. And that's the end of the bulletized list. And so he goes on, he says, of course, there are also some potential problems that can arise from the use of AI in the whiskey industry. For example, some people may worry that AI will lead to the dehumanization of the whiskey making process. I count myself amongst that group of people personally. That's me saying that. Dr. Matt did not say that. He goes on, he says, others may worry that AI could be used to create counterfeit whiskey products. Very interesting. Overall, I believe that the potential benefits of using AI in the whiskey industry outweigh the potential problems. AI has the potential to make whiskey production more efficient, create new flavors, and personalize whiskey for individual consumers. I believe that this will lead to a more sustainable and profitable whiskey industry in the future. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts on this. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Sincerely, Dr. Matt. And then there's a PS. And in the PS it says, the real Dr. Matt here. I hope you found this letter interesting, but would it surprise you to know that the letter was created entirely by AI using Google Bard? They, and that's in quotes, do seem to have some good points, whoever they are.
Sneaky. So the real reason that the intro at the top of the email is wrong is because he let AI write it, and then he corrected it at the end. I did wonder as we were going through this if this was going to be like a little twist at the end of P.S. I didn't write this. The robots did. And I was right.
Yeah.
So, can't outsmart me, robots. That's my take home from this.
So you knew? You had a feeling that was potentially an AI written email?
It'd be a good way of presenting your case for AI. I have had this discussion very recently, actually. We had it in our tasting that Chris and I host. Somebody brought this up. One of the guys who comes to our tasting who works in tech and is actively involved in a couple of AI-based projects. So we had this discussion at the end when we've all had, a few drams and everyone's feeling a little bit more philosophical. My immediate response to this is to be very curmudgeonly and say, no, do not improve it. Leave it alone. Use AI for fixing real things that need fixing. Leave my whiskey alone. Yep. And then I thought about it a bit more. And I thought, well, it could be interesting. There are some distilleries who have done work with this. For example, Macmira did do an AI intelligence, that's the release of whiskey, based project, where they allowed a computer program to come up with, I think, 1,000 recipes. But the final whiskey that they made was chosen by humans and then produced. I don't know. I feel like because whiskey is such a personal thing, so if I have a dram today of something that I know and love, like you regularly reference, your kind of like reset whiskey is Glenmorangie. But some days that dram from that same bottle will taste different because, you're tired or you're thirstier or it's warmer or it's a Tuesday, not a Friday. I don't have the capacity to understand how you could create a bit of tech that can allow for the infinite amount of human variables to then for a robot to be like, oh, well, I think you would like this. I mean, we already kind of have that sort of thing on a lot of shopping sites. If you buy a Klein Leash, then tongue-in-cheek, the robot will be like, hey, you bought a Klein Leash. Have you thought about buying
You may
Brora?
also like this, yeah. Well,
so there's that. I guess maybe it's a slight extension of that.
Just to add on to what you're saying there used to be a website, I forget the name of it, but it was Andy who used to be with Glencairn. Him and some other people would run this. Where
they were the Whiskey Blender, I think it was called. You went on the website and you slid a load of variables, and then it created your optimal blend based on what you put in, right?
Which I think is, I like that over the idea of AI for a couple reasons. I think giving someone the tool to put in what they feel their preferences are gives them the full control over what that final product could be. So for those of you who are listening that don't know what we're talking about, the website, I think, was called, and maybe still is, I don't know if it's around anymore, but it was called the Whisky Blender. And like Jess mentioned, there'd be a bunch of variables, and you would have this slider, this indication slider of how much of one flavor you'd like over the other, and vice versa. And it would just allow you to create a blend to a profile that you would find interesting. I like that because you've got the control. I definitely appreciate what Dr. Matt's robot put in his email, where, you know, the idea of AI tracking my purchasing habits to then come up with something it thinks I may like. Like, I understand that already happens because of the use of cookies and all that stuff. But, like, it's so creepy to me. And like cookies at this point for the UK and for the European Union, there's laws in place for you to opt in or opt out to cookies.
A pain in the ass.
Right?
Every
It's
single
a pain
website.
in the ass.
Do you want a cookie? Yes, I was here yesterday. Stop asking me.
It's a pain, but at least it puts people in control, which if you don't want that control, that's fine. At least you've made that decision. But man, that, like, AI creeps me out. Doing genetic testing and people, you know, having access to my DNA creeps me out. Like, I don't know if I'm old, if I've watched too much sci-fi, you know, or what it is, but like, I just find AI absolutely creepy, and I like the idea that whiskey has always been a people-led endeavor for making and consuming and sharing, and handing that over to a computer to make decisions. Yeah, it kind of freaks me out. Like, I'm sure that the youngs may.
I've, in a whiskey context, I've been recently to the Johnny Walker Experience on Princes Street in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
Which I went into a little bit kind of... I wasn't really sure what to expect. I'd seen a lot of very glamorous pictures. I've had various friends that have done different things in the industry involving that setup. And I went and I did the Whiskey Maker's Cellar Tour. I think that's what it's called. I think it's the most expensive one you can do there.
Did you say Skeletor?
Cellar Tour.
Cellar Tour, not Skeletor.
Skeletor would be even better.
Oh my gosh, that would be so much better.
You could get that kind of vibe. Anyway, it's very fancy, and it's underneath Princes Street, and they call it a whiskey warehouse. It is genuinely a bonded warehouse, but for any of us who are listening that have anything to do with whiskey, there's a grand total of 6 casks in this bonded warehouse. It's not what the rest of us in the old biz would call a bonded warehouse, but anyway. And it's really interesting because you get to try a whole load of things that Diageo don't usually put out, and that really you only see in the realms of indie bottlers like us. So they had one of the drams that you could try was a Tir Ninach, and it was it was distilled at Tir Ninach, and it was rye that they have distilled at Tir Ninach because they have that totally different setup with the mash filters, blah blah. Yep. So very cool. And then at the end, the host asked us what we had enjoyed, and with an iPad and some digital magic, she created a blend based on our input of what we had enjoyed throughout the tasting. So obviously, the whiskey nerds and us divided up to make sure we had actually got to try all of them, because, you know, we're completionists and we can't just try one thing, we have to try all the things. But I really enjoyed that because it was the showmanship of how it was all done and like how it was all put together. Check it out, it's well worth it. But I enjoyed that. That's a form, I guess, of like what the Whiskey Blender guys were doing. That's, you know, you are controlling a set of variables to create an outcome that it was the end. I can't remember how many she said there were, maybe 4 or 6 different recipes that it adds up to, and they were all created by the master blenders. So you answer a series of questions, and that takes flavour profiles, and it creates a blend at the end, and they give you a little hint as to what's in some of it. Very cool and fun. And then when you go upstairs to the ridiculously Disneyland themed fancy dancy retail experience, I think we have to call it, not a shop. Had the same. They had a big quiz thing, and you answered like on sliders, like you liked a kind of more floral, or if you liked smoky, you know, those kind of set categories that we're used to looking at with whiskey.
Yeah.
The flavour profiles, and then at the end of that it recommended a Johnny Walker bottling that, based on the answers you're given, should fit your palate. So obviously mine tends to be biased more towards the smoky, so I came out with the Johnny Walker Double Black. But it, you know, I was recommending all of them, you know, like the gold and the blue label and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was quite fun, because it's getting you to think about whiskey in, can I call it layman's terms, you know, in a way that is maybe people who aren't used to picking up a glass and then, you know, poetically giving you 15 different tasting notes. People who still find that disconnect of like, well, how is that liquid in that glass there supposed to taste like honeycomb or blah blah pear drops. So allowing people to think about food flavors that maybe they understand, and then they could try a whiskey and be like, oh yeah, right, I feel like I can detect some of these flavors that I had wanted to pick in a glass into it. So I think that's interesting. I guess I'm a bit like you. I've got a bit of a, where does it end with AI? But it's only as good as the information you're putting in. So my friend Flo, and listener of the podcast, hello Flo, was talking about they had done a study, and if I'm telling this story wrong, Flo, please forgive me, where they had used an AI program to look at scans of patients' chests of X-rays to detect cancerous growths and, you know, like help detecting illnesses. And the AI, it turned out, was really good at this, but it was more to do with the fact that the program learnt that if a scan from a patient came from hospital A, that hospital had a higher incidence of the illness of the lung cancer. So it learned AI, but not quite in the way that was anticipated. And so my friends that are much more tech aware than this have tried to explain, you know, the worst of my fears away of, it doesn't necessarily learn in like a linear fashion. It's reading in a way, because it's not a human brain, so I guess it's looking for more things. So like in the case of these hospital scans, if you were being referred from there, it was an oncology hospital, so it was more likely that if your scans were being sent from this hospital, you had already had some sort of, you know, like abnormality detected. Is what I took home from the explanation of the people who understand these things better than I do. So it's not quite as clever as like a sentient being, like learning in a straightforward way that I guess a human brain would want to, because it's analysing everything. It's like a sponge absorbing all the information. Could it, like pretend Dr. Matt has suggested, could it help make whiskey more efficient and create new flavours? Well, yeah, I guess it could. But the other question is, well, why do we want it? Like, when we're saying we want to make whiskey more efficient, what is it we're looking for? Are we looking at for an environmental level? Are we wanting it to be more energy efficient, you know, greener? Or are we wanting it to be, okay, we can get these incredibly complicated fermentation characteristics in what would normally take, I don't know, 180 hours, but we found a way to bring it so it does it in 40 hours.
Yeah.
So that you can push it through quicker. I'm not sure that whiskey really necessitates those kinds of efficiencies. Like, when you go to distilleries, they're always incredibly proud of, especially the ones that do it, here's our really long fermentation, here's how slowly we run our stills, here's our long maturation. I don't know if that, in my mind as a whiskey drinker, I'm wanting it to be more efficient.
No, but
does that make sense? Did I just witter for a bit?
No, I think it makes sense from our perspective, in that we are typically drinking from distilleries that talk about the things that you've just talked about, right? Green initiatives and you know, minimizing carbon footprints but we've got long fermentations and slow distillation, and you know, our wood policy is such and so on. But I would also argue that there's plenty of other distilleries that are focused on efficiency for making liquid to go into a 3-year-old blend, right?
Mm-hmm,
and so some of these other things are less of a consideration, and maybe for that, you can find something that can help the overall production. But here's what I'll say about it. And I was thinking about this the other day because it seems like AI wants to get into everything, or people want AI to get into everything. This past December, my 16-year-old got her driver's license. And ever since she got her driver's license, she wants to be the one driving. Can I drive? Yeah, go ahead. Can I drive? Yeah, go ahead. Can I drive? No, I kind of want to drive my car. Like, please. And so my point is, just because we have AI doesn't mean it has to be used all the time and everywhere. Just because my daughter now has her license doesn't mean she has to be the driver all the time. Like, there is a time and there is a place, and you can find benefits like in hospitals, right? Or like in other areas. But like, just because something exists doesn't mean it has to be involved in fucking everything.
That's very true.
Yeah.
I also feel like that was a little bit about the driving. Just a little bit. I remember well being in that position. Do you not too? Like the joy of something new? Just be like, yeah, I want to be the... Which I guess is also like the AI.
She just loves hopping in the car, blasting music and driving. Like, you remember those days. Just like, the best. I'm out. I'm away. Yeah.
I still do. I love being in my car driving. Sorry, that's not reassuring you in any way. I think that's probably the same as AI. Like, explore it and see what benefits it could bring. It's funny. I guess it's particularly jarring in an industry like whiskey, which is quite traditional, and we're not very good at changing. We're very hesitant, I think, in whiskey to change things quickly, whereas in, medicine and science, where there's always a hunt and a desire for progression and improvement, I think I would have thought much more accepting of an AI application than whiskey, where we're still doing pretty, and some distilleries especially, very rudimentary, very basic processes. Makes you wonder, how can you improve that using AI, and do they want to? Whereas I can imagine maybe some of these newer distilleries who are not the producers of the, bulk liquid to be put into 3-year-olds, to be put into blends, people who are looking to champion what they're doing, maybe a bit of AI wizardry could be added into their narrative and what they're doing.
Maybe. I don't know, like being with David Thompson this past week, one of the things that he really highlights is there's no computers. Everything is done by mechanics. Everything is nosed. It's done by sight. It's done by taste. It's traditional. There's, I think with whiskey in particular, there's a certain romanticism attached to it that if you apply too much AI to it, that maybe some of the magic is taken away a bit. And,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I've always said that I wanted to do this idea of no bullshit whiskey tours where they take you to, like highly efficient grain plants, and it's not the slightly misty-eyed kind of bagpipe playing hookta tour of a distillery. We do a great job as an industry of selling that, and I can see why. It's a very appealing way to present whiskey and the history. I think what Johnny Walker are doing with Princess Street and the Four Corners, as cynical as you want to be about it, they're putting a much more contemporary twist on it, but still telling essentially the same story, albeit in a slightly lighter and brighter manner. I'm not sure. I don't like change, so to me, I don't really want to see that AI has improved everything and made everything better. Like, Nothing would make me more sad than going to Springbank and instead of that lovely bit of board they've painted black and there's a bit of chalk tied to it, now they've got a really very high-tech computer system in place. I would think a bit of the magic's died, but who are we really to stand in the way of progress? Like, just because we want to see the bit of chalk on a bit of string with a blackboard. Maybe that's holding back Springbank from being the best it could be.
The last thing we need, Jess, is to have a Skynet Terminator making our whiskey for us.
That's very true. That's true. Okay, right. So the official answer is the verdict is out, Dr. Matt. We feel like you and your robot, we're not sure we want it to be touching our whiskey. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think.
How could we test it on a small scale? Yeah, I'd want to see like a small scale. Would you sacrifice a distillery for them to be the AI guinea pigs? And then I also worry that this way madness lies. How far do you take it?
When a distillery goes on shutdown and it's run by AI, does it just say like "I'll be back," like for when it's going to come back?
Yeah,
that's my Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation. Almost as good as Michael Caine, by the way.
I love it. Like that's AI has to come with a series of bad impersonations of actors and characters from movies to reassure us that they haven't taken over yet.
My name is Michael Caine, and I'm doing the mashing today. Right? That was AI. AI did that.
It wouldn't give you confidence, though. If it's a really bad impersonation, would you not be like, I don't trust AI Michael Caine to do the mashing
this
today?
Mash is going to be
washing.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's going to be like soup. Let's all stay out.
Right, this is how Michael Caine speaks. Michael Caine speaks to his nose like that. He gets very, very specific. It's very like that. When he gets loudly, it gets very loud indeed. It gets very specific. It's not quite nasal enough the way you're doing it, all right? You're not doing it the way he speaks. You're not doing it with the kind of... And you don't do the broken voice when he gets very emotional. When he gets very emotional indeed. She was only 16 years old. She was only 16. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. That's Michael Caine.
Dr. Matt, hopefully Jess and I have argued the points. We've solved what could or should be done with AI in the whiskey world. At least we've solved it to your satisfaction. If you, the listener, want to be like Dr. Matt and would like to reach out to us, you could please do. Please reach out to us. Questions at onenationunderwhiskey.com, no E in whiskey, or info@singlecastnation.com. Me, Jess, or Jason would be happy to answer your questions. If you like the podcast, please tell your friends, your loved ones, your neighbors. And you can also go to Apple Podcasts and give us a rating if you really love it. 5 stars would be awesome. Say a nice thing and maybe we'll name check you. We'll give you a middle name that you may or may not love. But we'll be sure to announce it here on the podcast.
Is that bribery?
Yes,
Are we offering bribery to people? Give us 5 stars and we'll give you a cool new name.
I think so.
Okay.
I think
I'm
that's
behind this.
So, Jess, I want to raise my coffee mug to you, and to the listener, and to Thad Vogler, and to Jason,
and
give you a cheers.
Okay.
And the what? Oh,
in
and
the
Dr.
wilderness.
Matt, and the wilderness,
and the fake Dr. Matt,
and the fake Dr. Matt, Robo Matt. Oh,
that's his new name.
That's got to be his nickname, Robo Matt.
But only when we're writing to the robot one. We're only addressing the robot.
Right. Okay. Well,
we can work on this.
Still say it. Yeah. All right. Well, I raise my glass, my cup, my mug, whatever it is. Cheers, Jess.
Cheers. 2 chins.